And joining us on the line is Francois Beukman, a chairperson on the Portfolio Committee on Police, and Carl Niehaus is former spokesperson for Nelson Mandela, and Brigadier Jay Naika is a spokesperson for the Acting Provincial Commissioner of KwaZulu-Natal. We'll start with you, Mr. Beukman. Good evening and thanks for joining us. So what can you tell us in terms of finding a lasting solution to these political killings in Glablands?
Thank you and good evening, and thank you for the opportunity. Our two-day visit in KZN with a specific reference to the Glablands Hostel indicates that it's a complex matter. In terms of the briefings that we received, in terms of the causes of the conflict, it relates to competition for social power, competition for political power, and also competition for resources. There's also allegations of corruption and collusion by state officials, and of course, poor living conditions, and also the collection of monies from residents for rooms and so on. So, to a large extent, it's got to do with the social conditions and economic conditions. And the Portfolio Committee's view is that, of course, the provincial government of KZN and the city of eThekwini has got a huge role to play to deal with those issues. From the law and order perspective, we believe that the South African Police Service can do more. And part of our visit was to evaluate the current response by SAPS with regard to the issues at Glablands. Now, part of the current challenges is that there's 66 murder cases that's currently being investigated by the provincial task team. And of those 66 cases, the number of arrests is 25. And our view is that there should be a further effort to increase those arrests. And yesterday, during our discussions with the Umlazi cluster and the provincial commissioner, there's been a commitment made of 5 additional detectives being allocated to that specific provincial task team. Furthermore, there has been a commitment also today by the acting provincial national commissioner that there will also be a further complement from national coming to KZN to assist. And then there's also indication that SAPS in KZN is ready to establish a satellite police station in the precinct of Glablands, but they're just waiting for the city to provide the necessary land. So from a stabilization and law and order perspective, the committee feels that there is progress being made. But the bigger issue is there needs to be intelligence-driven network operations in the area. There's also a commitment made by the head of CI in KZN that they will increase those operations. Because at the end of the day, the dilemma is there's not a lot of witnesses who are prepared to come forward. We also had indications that there is witnesses that's currently in the witness protection program, but we believe it's essential that it must be a multidisciplinary approach by SAPS to deal with this current problem.
You said that just on the investigations so far that these are largely due to socio-economic and living conditions and scramble for resources. Are you ruling out the motivation of political killings in the area?
Well, in terms of the research and in terms of the evidence we received from the police, of course, it is competing groups within the hostels that's involved in the violence. And it's quite important that if there is any, links maybe with rogue police, those matters should be investigated as a matter of priority and dealt with. We also heard today from civil society groups in the area that there's police complicity, but our view is those allegations must be investigated and tested.
All right, please stay on the line, Mr. Beukman. We also have Carl Niehaus, who is the National Executive Committee member with the MKMVA and former spokesperson of former President Nelson Mandela. Mr. Niehaus, thanks so much for joining us. I mean, KwaZulu-Natal had always been a hot spot, even prior to the maturity of our democracy in terms of political fighting. In your view, is this a reservoir of hitmen, as has been reported, deliberately for political control?
Well, Sandy, let me first of all say that from the side of the ANC and from Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association, we are deeply concerned about the violence. And I think one must immediately also extend one's condolences to the families that are severely affected by this. I think we must be careful to jump to the conclusion that there could be a political motive here. I think the input that we have received just now also indicating that there are very, very important and serious socio-economic conditions that underlie this violence have to be investigated. From the side of the African National Congress, and specifically from Umkhonto we Sizwe Military Veterans Association, we would like to call on the South African Police Service to intensify their presence at the Cleveland hostels, but also to intensify the intelligence work that they're doing to find out exactly what underlies this. But I'm very careful at this stage to jump to conclusions. We've had political violence in KwaZulu-Natal, but we must be careful to necessarily come to the conclusion that what we had seen in the last while, especially at Cleveland Hospital, is informed by political tension rather than all the other socio-economic tensions that I've just referred to.
All right, so let's invite Brigadier Jay Naika, spokesperson for the Acting Provincial Commissioner of KwaZulu-Natal. Brigadier, thanks so much for your time. We heard some of your colleagues citing a lack of adequate resources in dealing with this matter, but there's also scathing criticism around the municipality having failed the community around the Cleveland's hostel. In your view, is there something that can be done in the immediate? Is there lack of political will to deal with this matter?
Hi, Cindy. I think the previous two speakers covered the situation quite adequately. I think I'm quite happy with what they said, and I'm in agreement generally with what they are saying. Yes, there can be much more to be done. Obviously, the infrastructure around the hostel complex itself is a big challenge, and that is why even with the current deployment of police officers, these hitmen or the killers that are living in the hostel, they know the environment, they know the escape routes, they know what challenges exist. So when they conduct, when they kill someone, they know exactly how to escape using those challenges, like for instance the lighting. They know exactly where the cameras are facing, so they're able to escape. So yes, there can be much more done to improve the security, and that will assist police greatly in the complex itself.
But shouldn't there be a covert or underground a sort of intervention where, if you're saying that there are limitations to what the police intelligence can achieve, surely there can be different strategies, Brigadier?
Yes, absolutely. Our intelligence community, they have been very successful. We've made a number of arrests, especially with the firearms. And remember, some of these people, although they were operating in Cleveland, they were arrested outside the hostel due to intelligence. But definitely, I agree with my previous speakers, much more can be done in terms of the intelligence community to assist the troops on the ground.
Please stay on the line, Mr. Beekman, Mr. Chairperson, just in how this whole matter has been dealt with. I mean, it's not treated with the urgency, seemingly, that it deserves. Number one, there is, besides the arrests that have been made, but killings continued. A woman was shot dead there yesterday. So what then do we say from a municipal point of view, the intelligence, the police services to the community of Cleveland? Hello, Mr. Beekman.
Yeah. From the police perspective, or from the portfolio committee's perspective, it's quite important that there should be close interaction between the various role players. In our discussions also this afternoon, we also indicated there's a role for the Department of Social Development as well as COCTA to play, to come on board to assist with the multi-dimensional problems with relation to the social and living conditions. That's quite critical. Because unless the living environment and the spatial planning is improved, you will have a position where 19,000 people will be in close proximity in very poor conditions, bad lighting, bad infrastructure. So the social conditions must be addressed as a matter of priority. Once again, we believe that the South African Police Service made some commitments during this last 2 days to improve the situation. And once again, the issue of intelligence-driven operations is quite critical. So there also needs to be a confidence-building exercise with the public and the inhabitants of the hostels. I think the South African Police Service management in KZN is fully aware of it, but we also believe national management of SAPS must also add more resources to the province in KZN to assist with this process.
Mr. Niehaus, just from a political point of view, should there be a shutdown in terms of the living conditions, taking that into consideration, because it's a humanitarian crisis. There would be children living in these poor conditions. What should there be more drastic or radical approach to this?
Cindy, I think there has to be a two-pronged approach. The one side is what we've heard from the police, that there has to be an intensification of police presence and police action. Especially on the side of intelligence, it's critical that we get to the bottom of who the criminal elements are that are involved and that we deal with this. On the second side, and this is the longer term side of it, we have to address the issues of the living conditions of the people in that area and in many other areas in South Africa, because we have seen that poverty, lack of service delivery, underlying and mixed in with criminal elements leads to a life for South Africans where they live under violence, where they are fearful, and especially where women and children are the worst victims. So on the socio-economic side, we have to intensify our activities for service delivery and to improve the living conditions in those areas. I do not see us finally resolving this problem if we do not deal with the social, economic and service delivery component of this whole issue that we are talking about.
Yeah. Brigadier, is there continuous surveillance in your investigations? Because it seems that there is a short reprieve where the violence stops for a couple of days or weeks, and then we hear about another killing in that area.
Yeah, we did there was a lot of hard work that was done by government, various government departments, NGOs, working together with SAPS, and I think we did to a larger extent resolve some of those conflicts, and there was relative peace. Now we've had a resurgence where there have been a few incidents. We don't want to comment on the motives, so it may not be related to the previous incidents that occurred when all of the violence started. But yes, we are monitoring the situation. We have a large-scale deployment. As Mr. Beekman said, the portfolio committee was in the province and made certain recommendations which the provincial commissioner will adhere to. But I just want to say that we're not losing hope, because we've had a number of flashpoints in KZN that experienced similar violence. And if you talk of hostels, KwaMashu not very far away, similar conditions, if not worse, where the infrastructure was very poor and there was a lot of conflict at that stage. And with our deployments and all the different government departments and role players working together, we are seeing for the past couple of years relative peace and calm in that hostel, except for a few incidents of crime that's taking place. So all is not lost, and I think if we all work together, and as well as the community, we need the community to work with police. It cannot be people that are paying hitmen to resolve a conflict. Some of those issues are of a domestic nature, and we can't have people in a hostel hiring hitmen to kill somebody just because over a minor disagreement. So we need people to work together to use the resources. There's not just the police, there's other NGOs and government departments working there. Use those resources to resolve existing conflicts and not resort to violence.
Please stay on the line. We have a caller, France, calling us from Pretoria. Good evening to you and welcome.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm trying. We are very concerned about these killings. So the thing is, how can we stop it? The only way is, can we try to change the policing system, whereby someone who born in like KwaZulu-Natal to be working somewhere in Pretoria, someone from Pretoria working in KwaZulu-Natal. I think something can change.
Are you saying relocating people, so to speak?
Yeah. That's the thing can change because those people, they know each other. It's very difficult. It's like your son is working in the same department with you. Can he say something about you, your behavior? Nothing. So if we can try to locate the policing system, I think it will work in South Africa. Otherwise, there will not change.
All right, Franz, thanks so much for your call, calling us from Pretoria. Mr. Chairperson, Mr. Beekman, just in the resources around the police again, in France suggesting that if police members were rotated so that they're not too familiar with the criminal element within that area because there has been allegations of rogue policing also perpetuating the situation.
I think that is a very valid and constructive proposal by the caller. We also discussed and mentioned that during our discussions this week, that if need be, maybe to bring also other resources from other provinces, especially in the detective TI environment, to assist and to ensure that there is no conflict of interest. So that, from a policing perspective, would be an option that the police will also can look at.
All right, Mr. Niehaus, just the tolerance among people. We heard from Brigadier that the nature of these attacks sometimes is due to a domestic dispute. And it's not something that it's easy to police because it happens behind closed doors and it brews over a certain period. How then do you think the police can be indicted in this, or it's an indictment on the police rather, as opposed to communities being intolerant in how they deal with disputes?
Well, obviously, it's a pretty tough job that they have, and it is sometimes very difficult to get to the bottom of what is going on. But you see, we're talking here about 92 killings in a short while. So this is a crisis. And a crisis has to be dealt with immediate and emergency intervention. So we need to see the police in force operating at Cleveland. We need to see action being taken against anyone who is involved in criminal activity and intelligence coming in, that those people can be removed from that environment because they continue to stoke on the violence. So what I would like to plead for is that there has to be intensive police involvement, that there has to be specifically resources released and made available for the police to do their job there. Because as we've learned in many previous instances, where there's hostile violence, where there's violence in a particular community, before you can address the underlying socio-economic issues, you first have to arrest the immediate violence. You have to contain it. So the process of containing sometimes demands that there has to be quite strong police action that needs to take place. So strong intervention, strong intelligence work, necessary arrests of people who are clearly involved in these criminal activities. And one would like to plead for that whole process, contain the situation, maintain peace in the area, and then start to do a proper socio-economic analysis of what underlies this violence. And to start addressing this, and here, of course, the African National Congress, as the ruling party, also in eThekwini, will have to address this matter very seriously and consider what needs to be done. But I'm sure the ANC will do that once that underlying study had been done and once the violence had been contained. That's absolutely critical.
Let's hear from Vugani in KwaZulu-Natal whether we have the luxury of time of still doing analysis and further reports while lives are being lost in Cleveland. Vugani, good evening to you and thanks for joining us.
Good evening, my lady.
Yes, sir.
I see on your panel you have Mr. Carl Niehaus, who is a former advisor to former President Nelson Mandela.
Yes, sir.
Yes, this being a KwaZulu-Natal problem, and it seems to be escalating, and it's being called a reservoir for hitmen. Wouldn't you think, Mr. Niehaus, you have a word, you're still a member of the ANC, you'd have a word with the president right now, sitting, to ask him if maybe he should intervene, because everybody is worried. As a resident of KwaZulu-Natal, I believe it is that time where we make a call to the number one citizen to say, umoya awehle. You've advised a president before. Don't you think you could also use that same, I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, but leeway to the sitting president right now? him being Zulu and from KwaZulu-Natal.
Okay, Vugani siyabonga kakhulu. Mr. Niehaus? Just escalating this to the president and treating it with the urgency that it requires. Yeah. No, Vugani, sorry,
I couldn't hear properly.
You couldn't,
sorry,
yeah.
my
So,
apologies.
no, it's fine. He just says that we need to escalate this and advise the president, or he needs to intervene, so to speak.
Well, I think intervention at a high political level is necessary, yes, and it is very important that we make sure that the South African police force has the resources to do so. I also agree that it is difficult to, at this stage, do the underlying research that is necessary, and that the police themselves have to act critically and immediately.
No, let me put it differently. I think what he meant, Vugane, was that there seems to be lack of political will, because if there had been, something would have been done about the situation.
Well, that may not necessarily be true, Cindy. I think it is a situation where sometimes this violence creeps up on one has to address it. The challenge now is going to be whether there's the political will to deal with it. And I believe there will be. But the first challenge that has to be carried out now is to deal with it in terms of a law and order matter, so the police has to intervene.
All right, we'll find out if there's a continued police presence in the area. But Isaac in Middleburg, you are last caller on this. Good evening to you.
How are you,
Isaac?
Mama?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
Good, ma.
What's your comment or question?
Yeah, no, I think this killing problem, it will never stop until the government does something. The government must listen to the people. So, because the only thing is, these people, they kill people after they know very well that they're gonna come out through parole. So, government must listen to the people.
Isaac Siyabonga kakhulu. Just very lastly, Mr. Beekman, a police presence in the area, and your response to the criticism that the municipality and government is not doing enough or reacting to the situation.
I think it's an absolute priority for the government to deal with this matter proactively, as the other two gentlemen said. And I think from Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Police, we're going to monitor the situation very closely. We will also, on the 16th of May, call the DPCI to Parliament, especially with the issue of illegal firearms, because that is flaring up the situation. The illegal firearms that is available and in large quantities, and that is one of the systemic issues that must be dealt with in the coming weeks.
All right, thank you so much. That's Francois Beekman, chairperson for the Portfolio Committee on Police, and Carl Niehaus, a former spokesperson for former President Nelson Mandela, and Brigadier Jay Naik, a spokesperson for the Acting Provincial Commissioner of Police in KwaZulu. For now, we take a quick ad break. Thanks indeed for calling in.